Greetings. Welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing climate change, abrupt climate change, the possibility of compassionate degrowth, um, in the face of, well, possible extinction. So very quickly, YouTube is definitely trying to squash my channel. You would think with only 1,700 subscribers that they wouldn't, I wouldn't be much of a threat, but they are working whatever algorithms that they're working on me. What's funny is that, so every single video that I upload on a Thursday night, I usually upload my videos very late at night, right before the switch over to the next day. So I upload videos late Thursday night, and then most of the views come on Friday. But every single Thursday, if you care, if you have time or interest, if you go back through all my videos, every one that's uploaded on a Thursday has fewer views, usually way fewer views. For whatever reason, that's the day they choose to squash my view count. And so that happened this last Thursday, or into the Friday. Usually I have about 1,000 views within 24 hours, generally on every single video. And at 24 hours, I had like 600 views or 700 views. I was like, no, I didn't lose. And that's consistently on every video. So I didn't lose like 300 or 400 views, all of a sudden. But one of the ways that I hear on other channels that they try to mess with channels is they, don't count all the views to make it seem like nobody's watching. So it's like less appealing, whatever, they figure if you only have a couple, 100 views or a couple thousand views, that, people are going to be less interested. On some levels, it's a psychological trick. On some levels, maybe it works, but just know that they're doing that. Know that they're unsubscribing you. Also, whenever I get a sudden surge in subscribers or a sudden surge in views, they squash it. Also, a little funny trick that they do is right before I'll get a bunch of, I've had like 30 or 40 subscribers in just the last week. I had a bunch of subscribers to the channel, but right before I get to the next 100 mark, they'll squat, I'll be at like 10 to the next, I've been at like 1690 or around 1685 for like days, even though I know that people are subscribing, but they're kicking people off so that I don't get to the next 1,700 or whatever. Anyways, yeah. I mean, climate change in general is a ratings killer, but they just want to make sure that my ratings are absolutely killed. But thank you for your views. I know that you're watching. I know that you're commenting. I see that you're all there. So regardless of what they're doing, I know that most of you are not falling for the old potato in the tailpipe or whatever, banana in the tailpipe. I guess that's how the saying goes. So yesterday, when I was talking about having a plan and I was talking about having like the best minds, and I realized that I just threw out a bunch of like pop kind of people in the public eye when I was talking about Chris Hedges and Noam Chomsky, I guess pop leftists or whatever you want to say. But more importantly, I wanted to say actually that if we're going to have a real plan to fight this, that we'd have to, the people that really would have to be involved would be Indigenous people, First Nation people, people who are from oppressed classes would have to be part of the conversation, big part of the conversation, because obviously, we need more input from other people other than, the people who have been privileged and who have been running the show, or privileged by who has been running the show this whole time. So I used to talk about this a long time ago. I haven't really talked about it lately, but in our capitalist culture, our industrial civilization, we generally tend to export our way of life to other countries. And really the way to mitigate climate change, if we're going to have any chance, is to um, import cultures or ideas from other countries, poorer countries, people who still live off the land, people who are still um, not touched by industrial civilization. There are very few left, but these are the cultures and these are the people that we actually need to learn from. Those are the people that are closest to nature, living in nature. Um, and you know, a lot of the art and the beauty of that has been lost. The ability to live in nature without all the things that we have has been lost. And so um, that would be fundamental to incorporate into a plan on how to live outside of the system that we currently live in. Or if we were going to, um, if we were going to accommodate nature instead of ourselves, we'd have to reverse the trajectory of civilization. So, with that being said, I'm going to get into a couple of articles. I know that's a long intro. Earth Anarchist sent me this. Indigenous nations on both sides of the border unite to oppose expansion of Delta Port. I have a lot to cover, so I'm not probably not going to read entire articles. I'm going to skim kind of through these. The Lumi Nation is calling for a moratorium on additional ships entering the port of Delta, British Columbia, out of concern for marine life in the Salish Sea. The Vancouver Port Authority wants to expand the facility. Of course they do. But a BC First Nation is backing the Lumi Nation located west of Bellingham, Washington, and making it clear they are not on board with the project. We are Coast Salish nations that have come together from both sides of the border with the United States and Canada to address this urgent issue that's happening to our Salish Sea, said Raynell Morris of the Lumi Nation. Other Indigenous groups in Canada and the United States, like the Salil Watooth Nation in British Columbia and the Tulalip tribes in Washington, are supporting for the call for more investigation into the environmental impacts before any new container traffic is allowed. I heard personal stories of fishermen being out on the water and they could see a black soot coming across the water to their traditional territory, said Reuben George, manager of the Salil Watooth First Nation Sacred Trust. George emphasized that international borders don't matter when it comes to protecting the environment, and that the Lumi and Seal Watooth nations are united on the issue. This is not a First Nations problem. This isn't an environmental person's problem. This is everybody's problem. So yeah, I'm going to link the rest of this story. It's not too much longer than that. Moving on to another story from Truthout. Indigenous struggle is key to a Green New Deal. This is from today. Newly inaugurated Representative Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez made headlines with her bold proposal for a new Green Deal. The plan is an aggressive proposal to be off fossil fuels by 2030. A Green New Deal of this scale would require mass mobilization and demands to resist current fossil fuel projects while demanding a new future. One of the points in Ocasio-Cortez's plan is calling for the protection of Indigenous nations and communities. Indigenous people have been on the front lines of extractive policies in the US and Canada, while also being frontline resistors. 2 years ago, we witnessed the inspirational struggle at Standing Rock calling to stop the Dakota Access Pipeline. Indigenous resistance is attempting to push back increased attacks on Indigenous lands by both Donald Trump and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, that raging liberal, in the service of fossil fuel energy projects. One of Trump's first executive actions was to pursue completion of the Dakota Access Pipeline and the Keystone XL pipeline. Trump also dramatically reduced the size of Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante national monuments, opening the way to possible resource extraction. The monuments were expanded under Obama after Indigenous people called for these sacred areas to be protected. On the other side of the border, Justin Trudeau may not be as cruel with his words, but his actions are like those of Trump. Trudeau recently had the Canadian government purchase the Kinder Morgan pipeline, which was being challenged by First Nations in Canada. Now a state-owned pipeline cuts through Indigenous land, violating treaty rights. Another example of Indigenous resistance to pipelines is in Wet'suwet'en territory in northern British Columbia, the site of a battle against Trans-Canada's Coastal GasLink pipeline. Driving up to the Unist'ot'en camp in unceded Wet'suwet'en territory, the road is blocked with a sign that says Wet'suwet'en KWA checkpoint. Unist'ot'en territory, no access without consent. The camp was started in 2010 to prevent Trans-Canada, the same company that was pushing the Dakota Access Pipeline, from building their $4.7 billion LNG Coastal GasLink pipeline, which stretches across all of British Columbia. Indigenous nations in British Columbia never signed treaties with the Canadian or British government and have been attempting to settle these issues since the Canadian Supreme Court ruling in 1997. Yeah, there's actually some videos about that resistance in British Columbia against the GasLink pipeline. Pretty good videos, pretty interesting. I don't have the names or the links on hand, but I have seen a few of them. That was a good line about Trudeau not being as brutal as in his words, but as brutal in his actions. What was it? Oh, cruel. Not as cruel with his words, but his actions are like those of Trump. And who did the Dakota Access Pipeline, what did all that, who was president when all that started? That was Obama. And Obama just sat there and like watched it all go down. For months, people getting eyes, blown out, and people losing life and limb, and just absolute mayhem going on, while Obama was like, I don't know. And he finally, put an end to it, but it took a long time. But that was it was fairly wild that went on for as long as it did. I'm going to move on to this really interesting or scary, whatever way you want to look at it, paper from Scientific Reports, from nature.com. Risk of biodiversity collapse under climate change in the Afro-Arabian region. Abstract: for 107 endemic mammal species in the Afro-Arabian region, Sahara, Sahel, and Arabian Desert, we used ensemble species distribution models to 1, identify the hotspot areas for conservation, 2, assess the potential impact of the projected climate change on the distribution of the focal species, and 3, assign IUCN threat categories for the focal species according to the predicted changes in their potential distribution range. I got this from Nick Humphrey, I think posted this on Facebook. We identified 2 main hotspot areas for endemic mammals: the Sinai and its surrounding coastal area in the east, and the Mediterranean coast around Morocco in the west. Alarmingly, our results indicate that about 17% of the endemic mammals in the Afro-Arabian region under the current climate change scenarios could go extinct before 2050. Overall, a substantial number of the endemic species will change from the IUCN threat category least concern to critically endangered or extinct in the coming decades. Accordingly, we call for implementing an urgent proactive conservation action for these endemic species, particularly those that face a high risk of extinction in the next few years. The results of our study provide conservation managers and practitioners with the required information for implementing an effective conservation plan to protect the biodiversity of the Afro-Arabian region. It gets a little scarier. The unprecedented loss of biodiversity, with an estimated extinction of a species every 20 minutes, indicates that a sixth mass extinction is underway. There is now overwhelming evidence that both climate change and habitat fragmentation are together responsible for this exceptional biodiversity loss, with further accelerated extinction predicted during the next decades. Unless we implement effective conservation measures immediately, about two-thirds of the vertebrate populations could vanish by 2020. Is that right? I mean, we're talking about next year. If that's a correct number. Accordingly, the Convention on Biological Diversity listed strategic goals to forestall the ongoing loss of biodiversity, assessing the current and future biodiversity status and future trends are imperative to achieve these goals. Previous empirical studies show that species' ecological traits influence their response to climate change, and that response varies across species. Traits that may increase risk of extinction because of climate change include 1, narrow distribution ranges, 2, limited dispersal ability, 3, high level of specialization, and 4, low reproductive performance. Narrow range species tend to possess most of these traits and are therefore more vulnerable to climate change than other species. Accordingly, assessing the potential impact of climate change on biodiversity patterns and species distribution is essential to determine the most vulnerable species and areas, which would allow for prioritizing conservation efforts. Several assessments at global and continental scales have been carried out. However, effective conservation plans require information at the more local scale of biomes or ecoregions. The warm desert biome has been neglected in conservation ecology, yet the warm desert biome encompassing the Sahara and Arabian desert harbors a unique mix of fauna and flora shaped by the harsh climatic conditions and the long-term geographical connectivity between Africa and Asia. Therefore, many of the Afro-Arabian species are endemic and uniquely adapted to extreme environmental conditions. Climatic conditions limit mammal distribution by influencing physiological processes and vegetation conditions, which in turn determine resource availability. The mammal fauna of the Afro-Arabian region, and in particular, the endemic species, are among the most adapted to the extreme and harsh environmental conditions. However, evidence suggests that the genetic adaptation in mammals cannot keep pace with the current rate of climate change, making living at the edge of the physiological limits particularly risky. Mammals, as consumers, are at higher trophic levels and have a unique functional role in the ecosystem. Therefore, focusing our attention on them could be a useful surrogate for greater biodiversity conservation and a suitable way to prioritize conservation effort. Okay. Well, I just really wanted to read that first part because it's pretty scary. It's scary. Scary news. Let's hold on 1 second. Anyways, the report goes on and it's quite detailed. I'm going to link it below. Y'all can check that out. I'm going to move on to, I believe, this last article, which is fairly scary. Rare ice phenomenon forced a shutdown at a New Jersey nuclear reactor. The Arctic blast wreaking havoc across much of the U.S. was cold enough to shut down a nuclear reactor, thanks to a rare phenomenon called frazzle ice. I believe Christopher linked this, so thank you, Chris. Public Service Enterprise Group shut one unit at its Salem nuclear plant in southern New Jersey early Thursday after intake screens froze over, restricting the flow of water needed to cool the reactor, according to spokesman Joey Delmar. A second unit at the station on the Delaware River was powered down because of the same problem. The 60-foot, 18-meter tall intake screens rotate in and out of the water, preventing debris like floating wood from entering the plant. Under extreme conditions like this week, overnight low temperatures at the station fell into the single digits. The fragile ice can accumulate on the screens, blocking the flow. That caused water circulators to shut down and prompted Newark-based public service to take the plant offline. We had the heaters running, we had folks out there, and we lost the 4 circulators within 5 minutes, Delmar said. We couldn't say when Salem 2 is expected to go back into service. Oh boy, public service last shut a unit at Salem for fragile ice in 2010. Regular ice that forms on the surface of the lakes or rivers won't cause the same problem. The whole screen has to freeze over, blocking all or most of the water intake. I would characterize this as a rare occurrence, said Chris Earls, Senior Director of Regulatory Affairs at the Washington-based Nuclear Energy Institute. Once it warms up a little bit, it takes care of itself. Temperatures in the region are expected to climb into the mid-20s Friday and a balmy 40 degrees Fahrenheit Saturday, according to AccuWeather Inc. Yeah, so, okay, how many nuclear reactors have been taken offline in the last year due to extreme weather events? I can think of 4 or 5 right now. There was one in North Carolina from the hurricane, right? That supposedly shut down for a while, or did shut down. There's this New Jersey reactor. There were a few in France, was it, that shut down because of warm water temperatures during the summer. The water was too warm for them to sufficiently cool the reactor, so they had to take them offline. That's not good. That's a really scary sign that things are beginning to shift into dangerous territory. If we have, we've had 4 in the last year that I can think of right off the top of my head. But what if this turns into many nuclear reactors a year? What if this turns into nuclear reactors going offline for longer periods of time, or we have grid shutdowns because of weather, which would take a reactor offline eventually, and would also put it in danger of melting down eventually if the grid was down for long enough. Scary things to think about. That's why we need to follow Germany's cue and shut down all nuclear reactors right away, worldwide, right now. We need to start just that's got to be like, number 1 or 2 on the the plan. In the plan is just immediate shutdown of all nuclear reactors. Probably number 2 might be immediate destruction of all nuclear weapons. That would be really great if we could do that. And we could actually, what's the reason for not? There isn't. There is no reason. There's no logical reason other than, well, they have some and we can't do it. Nah, just destroy them. All it takes is one country going, we'll destroy all our nuclear weapons, and other countries would go, really? We can do that? Can we do that? That'd be awesome. Let's do it too. They wouldn't be like, ha ha ha, we're gonna come and overrun your country because, would they really? Would that happen? I don't know. At this point in the game, I think everybody realizes what a suicide pact this all is. So, why not just make that step? USA or China or India or some other country, just go for it. Just do it. That's all I have for you tonight. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. I'm very sleepy. I'm going to go to sleep very soon. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Until next time, peace.